Hi, I'm Ethan Veroba, son of Stuart Veroba and Shelley Veroba, and this is my history background. On my father's side of the family, in the early 1900s, my great-grandfather, Dean Hirsch, left Poland with his family to come to Canada in search of farmland. He settled on a farm in Lambton, Saskatchewan. His family started a grain farm. My great-grandfather was allowed to go to school until grade 6, and then he had to help on the family farm. But that is where he met my great-grandmother Vera. My great-grandmother Vera Heinrich came with her family from Germany, because Germany was no longer safe to live. They had a little house on the farm between Lambton and Beanfate, Saskatchewan, and had very little money. They got married after my great-grandma completed grade 10. They settled on a farm near Dean's parents and continued to farm their own land. My great-uncle Stanley still farms the land to this day. My great-grandma Vera was a stay-at-home wife and mother on the farm, which kept her very busy. My grandma Faye was born in 1947, and they had 5 other children after that, with one set of twins. My great-grandpa Dean died when he was 59, and my great-grandmother married again to Frank Victor. Once my great-grandma married Frank, they moved into Estvan to retire together. Frank passed away in 2004, and Vera passed away in 2007. My great-grandfather Frank really loved sports, and my grandpa said he watched his first hockey game between Canada and the Soviet Union in 1970s. My great-grandfather Henry Veroba's family also settled in Lambton, Saskatchewan with his family from Germany. They too were grain farmers, but my great-grandfather Henry didn't enjoy farming. Henry wanted to be his own business, so he started up a moving company. He moved buildings in southeast Saskatchewan. He married Edith Pratt and started his family. My great-grandmother Edith was also a stay-at-home wife and mother. She enjoyed socializing and dancing whenever she could. Henry was also very musical. He loved to play with his friends in a local band and would travel to small-town dances and play for them. Henry and Edith had 6 children. My grandpa Gordon was the oldest of 6, and he was born in August of 1947. My great-grandfather died at the age of 53 of a heart attack. Henry passed his love for playing musical instruments down to his children, and I enjoy listening to my great-aunts and uncles play music, and when the Verobas get together, we are planning a celebration for Canada's 150th birthday this year with the Veroba side of the family. They still tell stories to this day, celebrating their family when Canada's 100th birthday came around. They said it meant so much to our family to live in Canada and be Canadian. My grandma Faye met my grandpa Gordon because their farms were very close to each other. They began their relationship as childhood friends and then grew into love. They were married in 1966 and began their family on March 8, 1968, when my father Stuart was born. My dad was born in Lambton, Sask, but the family moved into Estvan, Saskatchewan shortly after his birth. They made the move to Estvan so that my grandpa Gordon could begin working at Sask Power Plant. They lived in a small house on 2nd Street, but soon they were able to build a home on Nicholson Road. They were able to afford to build their own home through a co-op program that allowed them to get a mortgage if they agreed to build it themselves. My grandparents attended classes in the evenings and that helped them learn how to build their houses. My grandparents worked with their neighbors to build some of the first homes on Nicholson Road. They still live in the same house that they built together and just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. On my mom's side of the family, my great-grandfather James Owen Brown moved to Manitoba from Scotland to live with his aunt and uncle. James began working on a railroad but didn't enjoy it. So he searched for a new career and found his passion driving trucks. He worked as a truck driver, and soon after he met my grandmother Audrey Wismer. Audrey lived in Brandon, Manitoba with her family who originated from England. Audrey's mother, my great-great-grandmother, was a nurse. Neither of them came from large families, and they were both city people. My great-grandmother was very sports-oriented. She played baseball on an all-girls team in the spring and summer months, and then skated during the winter months. She was very active before meeting my grandfather, James. After they married, they found a small 2-bedroom house on 5th Street in Brandon, and they raised 9 children at home. My grandfather, Robert James Brown, was born in 1955. My great-grandmother was a nurse's aide, but stayed at home for many years as a mother in the early years of marriage. My great-grandfather died in 1979, and my great-grandmother never remarried. My great-grandmother, Audrey, lived in the house on 5th Street until she entered a nursing home in 2011. My great-grandmother died in 2016. My grandma's father, my great-grandfather, was Roy Finley, and he and his family originated from Scotland. His family had very little money, and they settled down in Port-au-Prairie, Manitoba. Roy was a farmer, but he always had trouble with the crops. My great-grandmother, Mary Perard, lived with her family on a farm near Port-au-Prairie and met Roy through family friends. They married, had 11 children. It would have been 12, but the youngest died at birth. They had troubles feeding all those kids because my great-grandfather was an alcoholic, and Mary soon started drinking with Roy. My great aunts and uncles all left the family farm as soon as they could, but it wasn't a very nice family atmosphere. My grandma and Deloraine Grace Finley was the youngest of 11 children, and she was born in April of 1952. In 1963, my great-grandmother died of cancer, leaving my great-grandfather to raise the remaining 4 children that were at home. My grandma says she remembers being left in the parking lots of bars while my great-grandfather would be inside the pub drinking, and she wouldn't dare leave the car while he was in there. In 1966, my great-grandfather died of a heart attack, and Grandma was sent to live with different relatives in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. She was only 14 when her father died. When my grandma was 17, she found herself in Brandon, Manitoba, living with her aunt, and that is when she met my grandpa, Robert James Brown. My grandma almost loved the Kennedy family and Elvis Presley. She remembers the day President Kennedy was assassinated, and it made her very sad, but when Elvis died, she made the whole family watch the funeral on television, and Mom still remembers the white horses at the funeral. My grandpa, Robert James Brown, and my grandma, Deloraine Grace Finley, were married on August 17, 1867 in Brandon, Manitoba. They were married at a church on 5th Street, beside the house that my grandpa was raised in. So they lived in a basement suite. My grandpa would have hung out with friends versus going to work. So in 1968, my grandma Del told him to get out or get a job. He chose to get out, but came back after 48 hours and told her he was ready to get a job. They moved to Thompson, Manitoba, 9 hours north of Brandon, Manitoba. My grandpa was an underground nickel miner for 30 years. My grandma stayed at home to have 4 children. My mom was the second oldest daughter. When all the kids were in school, my grandma started to work at a hotel in Thompson. Soon she became the manager, and she was there until they retired in 1999. My grandma and Grandpa Brown retired hometown of Brandon, Manitoba. My grandpa developed lung cancer in 2012 and died of brain cancer in 2015. My grandma is still living in Brandon. My mom was born in Thompson, Manitoba. My mom, Shelley Brown, moved to Estevan, Saskatchewan in 1988. She moved to Estevan for employment and met my dad, Stuart Veroba, in 1994. My mom and dad were married in 1997, and I, Ethan Veroba, was born on February 21st, 1999. My dad was married prior to my mom, and he had 2 children from his first marriage. Tyler is the brother who I was born on September 15, 1990, and Erica is my sister, who was born on September 16, 1991. I was raised in Estevan since birth, but my siblings were raised in Regina, Saskatchewan. I was able to see them on the weekends and holidays. My dad has worked in the oil field since 1986. He started on the service rigs, then oil field maintenance, and now he's a battery operator. He checks leases and equipment on a daily basis. My mom used to work at the Fine Foods grocery store, but quit to stay home and raise me. Then my dad was in an oil field work accident, and he had to live at the Wascana Rehab Center for 2 years. So financially, my mom had to go back to work. So my mom went back to school and became a nurse's aide. She worked at the nursing home for 4 years and then for home care for 6. In 2010, she became the manager of Creighton Lodge, where she currently works. My mom volunteers for many organizations as she is a city councilor for Estevan. My mom and dad remember the day the Twin Towers were attacked in New York City. It was September 11, 2001. My parents were both at work, and I was at a babysitter's that morning. My parents said it was the first time they felt that the terrorist attacks were becoming a real reality. My family came from Scotland, England, Poland, and Germany. My ancestors all had mainly the same reasons to come here, in search of a better life. It was just the Second World War when most people migrated to Canada, and people became to Canada because of the famine and propaganda. I am proud of my heritage and blessed that my ancestors chose Canada as their homeland, so that I can proudly say I am Canadian. My grandparents have all experienced many different things, such as Canada's 100th birthday, the assassination of President Kennedy, and the first ever Canada versus Soviet Union ice hockey game. My family had many problems when they came to Canada, and it is very interesting learning all these things and hearing how I became to be a Canadian. Thanks for watching.